Good morning. Mark from Homans Associates here. I'm very excited to introduce the latest webcast from Housecall Pro. It's from last night, Wednesday, May 6th. Wednesday's webcast is all about employment and HR data trends during COVID-19. After the Housecall Pro team covers the daily news stories, they will be joined by Gary Ridge, Chairman and CEO of the WD-40 Company. Gary is responsible for developing and implementing high-level strategies, all of the operations, and the oversight of all relationships and partnerships for that company. He's sharing the key principles of being an effective leader that he uses to lead an absolutely iconic brand. If you're looking for more small business advice and information, you can check out the entire series of Housecall Pro webcasts on the Homans Associates YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type Homans Associates into the search bar, and you'll be able to see all of those videos. Of course, we'll post them on our social media pages as we have them, and then it's always on our website, homans.com/resources. There's links right at the top of that page. Have a great day, and now on to the webcast.
Welcome to tonight's show. I'm Alexa. I'm your head of online community here at Housecall Pro and your host for the Home Service Evening Update. I'm joined by my co-host, Roland. He's a co-founder of Housecall, and Mel, who's our Senior Vice President of People. You can think of us as your in-house business, marketing, and HR experts, and we're here to help. And each evening at 5 p.m. Pacific time, Monday through Thursday, we go live on Zoom and in Facebook, and we share the state of the world according to the home service industry. And then we go into one main topic with a special guest. So tonight, we're very excited to welcome Will Lopez. He's part of the Gusto team, and he is here to talk about employment and HR data trends that they're seeing on their end. So that'll be really valuable for you to tune in tonight after the news. And if you're wondering where to watch past episodes of this, go head over to our YouTube channel, just Housecall Pro, go search. Actually, you don't even have to search anything. It's the first playlist at the top, Coronavirus Evening Update. The past 8 weeks of broadcast will be on there for you. And of course, make sure you join the Facebook group. There's over 2,900 pros in there right now. We'd love to see you in there if you are not yet. So I'm going to pass it over to Mel for our State of the World news update, and then we will be back with Will. So I'm just going to put on speaker view here.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for being here tonight, Will. I'm Melina Fairley, Senior Vice President of People at Housecall Pro. Please feel free to call me Mel. As Alexa said, we do come to you live Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific for as long as we're needed. So we give you a recap on the news related to coronavirus and give you guests and information and a sense of community and hopefully a little inspiration here and there as well. So by way of introduction, I'm not a reporter or an expert in coronavirus. Rather, I'm a human resources professional. I have over 20 years of experience, and I come here to help each night and answer your employment questions. I'm also a homeowner. I'm a mom of 4. I'm a proud Marine Corps wife and a huge supporter of the work that all of you are out there doing right now during these challenging times. With that said, here is your evening update for Wednesday, May 6, 2020. The Johns Hopkins dashboard is reporting over 3.7 million global cases, over 262,000 deaths, and 1.2 million recovered as of this afternoon. In the US, there we go, thanks Roland, always the great assist there. In the US, we're at over 1.2 million confirmed cases, over 73,000 deaths, and last check was, almost 190,000 recovered to date. So watching that nice green number creep up. New York State and New York City both reported decreasing daily incident for the 3rd consecutive day. So that's the lowest daily value for each of them since March 18th. The percentage of tests performed with positive results also continues to decline in New York. So this is an encouraging trend. President Trump said that he'll now add 2 or 3 people to the coronavirus task force and that they will be focused on reopening the country. He also suggested that some of the current members may leave the group. So yesterday, as you may remember, I reported that the vice president and then the president announced that the White House coronavirus task force was being wound down. President Trump had said that his focus was shifting to reopening and a different group would be set up. But today, he said that the current task force will continue indefinitely. At a White House event earlier today, when asked about the change in direction, he stated that, quote, I had no idea how popular the task force is until actually yesterday when I started talking about winding it down. So it looks like that's just going to expand into the next phase as opposed to winding down and the new committee being created. Speaking of next phases, we're on to the next phase of debate and discussion over continued economic stimulus packages. So there's indications that the next round may help hard-hit states and local governments, something they talked about with the last round but didn't get through. Also looking at it potentially helping the Postal Service and funding more aggressive contact tracing programs to track the spread of the virus. The lawmakers are still divided over spending and how ambitious to be in the upcoming pandemic response bill. So we'll keep you posted on that. On social distancing, on May 4th, less than a week after extending a statewide stay-at-home order, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, and I know we've got some folks from Arizona on this call every night, that governor issued an executive order relaxing some of the statewide restrictions. So this new order permits barbershops and salons to resume operations and restaurants to resume dine-in service. So these businesses must implement social distancing and other safety measures, but they can reopen starting May 8th for barbershops and salons and May 11th for restaurants, despite the previous order to stay at home that was scheduled to expire not until May 15th. In Utah County, Utah, local health officials identified a COVID-19 outbreak, specifically 2 outbreaks associated with 2 local businesses that were not adhering to Utah's recommended social distancing practices. So those 2 outbreaks resulted in 68 total cases, including 48% of employees at 1 business. So the announcement about these 2 outbreaks followed a recent decision by Utah Governor Gary Hebert to relax statewide social distancing restrictions as they had transitioned from, quote, a high risk to moderate risk scenario. So we're going to start to hear lots about risk levels, reopening levels, dates moving around. Overall, Johns Hopkins researchers who produce that map that we look at every night, they state that as different areas begin to relax social distancing measures, it's going to be critical to monitor the trends in COVID-19 in order to quickly identify any increases in community transmission. So we will keep an eye on their updates for you and give you the information that you need here every night.
I feel like in software too, we do a lot of A/B testing, and I feel like with 50 states, we can run a lot of A/B tests. And so keeping track of, obviously where and when and what types of restrictions each state offers, we'll be able to figure out, is this optimal? Is this not? Can we change? Do we go back? Do we go forward? So we're going to be keeping a close eye on this stuff because we're going to probably start seeing some interesting things start to happen pretty soon, or not, which would be the best of all cases.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, you're seeing lots of calls online for barbershops and salons to be essential. I know quite a few people who've been cutting their own hair with varying results. I tried yesterday. It didn't go great, but I'm going to work on it.
Yeah, definitely. Here's the last thing that we have. We've got the Home Service Trades Health Index. This is data average across all of our pros. This is actually live, so if you guys want to go check it out for either your state or your industry, you'll see some varying results. Maybe home cleaning, definitely took a bigger hit than HVAC. Obviously, it's getting really hot, and with people being in their homes now more than ever, you even see that last week it was higher than this week. So this is something you can keep track of. We added some extra data in here for you guys in terms of variance in between scheduled jobs and completed jobs. So you can toggle that right here. But this is live data. So if you have a feeling in your stomach, you have that gut thing that you're like, ooh, I'm doing better or I'm not, this is a good place to check. So we'll post that link in here for you guys. You guys can browse on it, stay up to date. We update it every week as we get more data, but we'll keep kind of covering it here just to make sure that everybody sees it.
I know it is for sure getting so hot here in San Diego. It is like 82 degrees. So hopefully that means some good stuff for you guys in the HVAC industry. All right, thank you, Mel, for our news update. Mel is going to stick around tonight as our in-house HR expert, and I want to welcome Will Lopez to our show. So Will is the head of accounting community at Gusto. It's a platform that helps more than 100,000 small businesses nationwide pay, insure, and offer benefits to their hardworking teams. So he's sitting down with us tonight to give a data-driven take on furloughing versus versus dismissals, really what employment trends they're seeing, and also what to look for if you're seeking the help of an accountant, which he's going to speak more on later. So, Will, can you give us a brief overview of what you do and what Gusto does?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. This is really exciting. I mean, what don't we do, right? We just all hands on deck at Gusto. Generally speaking, people know Gusto of just payroll, benefits, and HR, but the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've just been head down in making sure that we're creating a bunch of content, bunch of product around trying to support small business owners and accountants weather this entire thing, which has been really interesting to see unfold. So the past 5, 6 weeks, we've created something like 20 product updates around coronavirus. I think a big thing where a lot of the industry took a big hit was obviously with their teams, right? And the CARES Act and everything that happened with the CARES Act was about unlocking a lot of the relief. So we've had to create a lot of product experiences to help small business owners unlock that relief. And so I oversee the team that generally supports the accountant side of things, but accounts serve with and empower small businesses. So it's working really closely with small businesses or accountants that serve them and trying to help them weather everything that's going on. So thanks for having me. This is great. Let's get started.
Thank you for being here, Will.
Great. And yeah, it certainly is a different time right now to be in HR, to be in payroll, to be doing the kind of work that you and I both do. So you have firsthand experience with the data of what's going on. Obviously, we have the big major trends. We've heard 30 million unemployed, but you are seeing firsthand what especially smaller businesses are doing. Can you tell us what's happening with when coronavirus hit? Like what did you see?
Yeah, so, we released a really good report, I think, last month that kind of had some month-over-month percentage increases in terminations and layoffs. And what we saw were like the top 5 industries that took a really big hit when this thing unfolded were food and beverage, salon and spa, sports and recreation, arts and entertainment, and retail. So what we saw in a month-over-month spike was in food and beverage, it was like 155% increase in terminations, and then percentage increase in layoffs was like 9,000% for food and beverage. And so we just saw that everyone was trying to accommodate and adjust their workforce according to coronavirus because we had totally shut down. And I think the stat on Friday was 97% of all America was pretty much in some sort of shelter in place or stay at home order, which pretty much shuts everything down and causes everyone not to go out and spend money. So you have to, for those particular industries that are very hourly driven, they had to readjust and figure out how are they going to maintain their business. So a majority of the behavior was just laying everybody off. And so we saw those industries took a really big hit. And obviously that's why unemployment took a huge spike, right? 30 million unemployed, which kind of suggests that the unemployment rate, which it hasn't been adjusted yet, is around 21, 22%. And the highest it's ever been was, back in the Great Depression, 1933 at 25%. So we're teetering historic times here. And we're trying to obviously not hit those historic times, but that was the interesting trend early on.
Okay. And is there any sense for how many, attempted to do temporary furloughs versus what might be considered a more permanent layoff? Is there a way to have some insight into that?
Yeah. So, so a lot of the behavior that we saw between furloughs and terminated employees were initially right off the bat terminations. And I think there was a lot of confusion around the CARES Act and a lot of confusion as to, businesses really understanding that they didn't have to terminate employees, but they could furlough them. Because what ended up happening was an onslaught of downstream effects occurred when you terminated someone. So if you had employees like using benefits or had benefits or 401k, when you terminated an employee, it ended up terminating their benefits and then getting them on things like COBRA. So I think that in the initial stages of things, there was this learning curve of like, oops, let's not terminate, let's furlough. Right now, a lot of companies are furloughing, understanding that they're getting access to funding like PPP or EIDL or even local and private stuff in order to hold them at bay, get that money in the door, and then get them back on payroll.
Right. And also something that is in many states is if you are terminating someone, you've got to process all that final paperwork, the final check, cash out, PTO, right. Accrued vacation. If it is a furlough or a reduction of hours, in many states, there's not that requirement. Certainly Gusto knows better about the 50 states than I do, but But that's one thing that's often a misconception, is that
Yeah.
you can sort of not schedule someone for hours, keep them on the payroll, not earning, but still be in your system, not have to pay off vacation and all of those things. So I think there's been some tough learning around that for some folks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of downstream effect when you terminate an employee. So it's best to just furlough them if you know you're going to rehire them, right? And that's really what the entire CARES Act was all about, to try to obviously, ideally, get money in your hands as fast as possible, right? TBD there. But, you know, the whole purpose is to hold them at bay and then get the funding in the door and then get them back on payroll.
Yeah, so I feel like one of the things that we did early on when we started this coronavirus nightcast is we said, hey, as soon as the PPP came out, EIDL, those ones, we told our pros, go get it, go get it, go get it. How to get it, when they simplified it, go get it again, go apply. So for some of our pros, they've gotten it. Obviously, we've all seen on the news what has happened for some portion of where the PPP was supposed to be allocated and it didn't end up being allocated. So for our pros that started getting those PPP loans coming in, they have got money sitting in their bank right now. What's the advice that you give them, and what's the advice you give to all your Gusto customers too?
Yeah, so I mean, if you get money and you got it, that's extremely amazing, because a lot of people have been struggling trying to get the funding. So if you have funding in the door, then use it, right? Start paying your team, start paying your bills, start paying those qualified expenses. So you don't want to sit on it. And the whole thing has always been about the speed of cash hitting your pockets and the pockets of your teams, even with all the missteps that have been going on. So what you want to do is just start spending it right away. And then start working towards completing that PPP loan forgiveness stuff. So Gusto, I think last Thursday, rolled out a really slick report around PPP forgiveness, so that way you can start getting that process going. But you have an 8-week period for the time that you receive the PPP loan to getting it forgiven by the lender, that you want to be very conscientious about, to start obviously proving out those expenses, because spending the money is what's going to actually get it forgiven. If you sit on it and you don't spend it, it's actually not going to cause forgiveness for you. So they're not going to give you money just for free. They want you to get that money and start spending it and getting your teams back in the door and getting your teams back on payroll.
Yeah, and we've got some pros obviously that are chatting with us live here. One of the pros is asking, where can we get that forgiveness sheet from inside of Gusto? Because I know that we've got a lot of people that are both using Housecall Pro and Gusto, but where would they go about finding that?
Yeah, so Gusto has a dedicated area on the left-hand side called COVID-19. So if in your dashboard at Gusto, if you click on COVID-19, and I could share my screen if we want, you could actually click in there, and there's a tile that says Paycheck Protection Loan Forgiveness Report. You just click that. You fill in the information. So you just disclose how much you got and when you got it. And Gusto does all that reporting for you. And based on from the date that you got that funding and all the payrolls between that date and the date of that report, Gusto will do all that calculation and analysis for you and totally serve up all the details. So you just print out that report and then you just start running towards the lender and trying to give them all the documentation.
Yeah, because ultimately they're going to be scrutinized and they're going to be looked at. Hey, were the PPP loans you give out, were they used for the right thing? All those same kind of things. And obviously, what part of it will be forgiven or not? Ultimately, if you don't end up using it, it becomes a loan,
Right.
Albeit a very generous loan, low interest rates, all the things, 2 years to pay back on the PPP, 30 years on the EIDL. But still, make sure whatever you can get for free or forgiven, do that. And stuff like that makes it super easy. So let's talk about some of the pros that couldn't get the PPP loan. What are you advising that they should do next? Because they've probably applied a lot of places and either been denied or not heard anything back. So what's your advice there? Because I feel like a lot of our SMBs are kind of in that place.
Yeah. So, overall, the SB actually rolled out a tracker. So I would still keep your ear close to the railroad tracks. And they have a tracker now that discloses how many loans have been guaranteed. And I think the last count is 2.4 million with over 5,000 lenders, totaling something close to $200 billion. So just keep your ear on the pulse of that whole program. Don't give up. And I would say still press forward. For those who haven't gotten funded or got denied or something like that, there are other SBA funding sources. PPP isn't the end all be all. You have the EIDL, right? For those who want to grab money there. SBA has express loans. SBA has the express bridge loans, just to name a few. There's also a tremendous amount of private relief that's out there. Just a few that come to mind: Zapier's $1 million small business assistance fund, right? Salesforce has this 10,000 small business dollar grant money. And then recently, Gusto rolled out a relief tracker on its website, free for everyone to see, that actually serves up a ton of the stateside and industry-specific relief. And so you can navigate those details totally up to date every single day. We have a team that's on top of it, and that gets you all the access to either the private stuff or the state stuff. So, you know, if you can't get the PPP, don't hang your head. There's a lot of resource out there from the private side. There's a lot of resource out there from the state side, and I would go for all of it all at the same time. And so that'll be your best chance of success, to just dive for the pile of cash that not only the federal government is offering, but then the state side offers.
Yeah, so we got it pulled up right here just on the shared screen real quick.
Yeah.
So you can search by state. You can see all the different programs that are there. You can go in, you can click, it's up to date. I almost feel like part of this is, you know, if you guys went to college and you had to go apply for a bunch of financial aid, you know, there's all kinds of people that are offering grant, and you just got to go shoot, and just take it and go and take it and go, because this stuff runs out pretty quick. And if it's not up to date, or if you're not up to date, you know, it runs out quick.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I think a lot of small business owners have been putting all their eggs in that PPP basket and some of these federal baskets, and there's just so much relief out there from private sources, from state sources, that there's just not a lot of awareness on. So I would just dive for that relief calculator, see what's out there, and just go for all of it.
Yeah, we'll post a link to that just in here too for you guys to go check out.
Awesome. Thank you, Roland. And remember, guys, too, if you have any questions for Will or Mel along the way, put them in the Q&A if you're on Zoom, and in the live feed if you're on Facebook. And Will, before we get into this next section, I wanted to ask you, Mel, can you give some examples of what I could spend with my EIDL money or in my SBA loan money?
EIDL and SBA. So we've put out some good content as well, and I'm sure Gusto has some. But they are different. So remember, the PPP is to protect paychecks. So they want you to spend the majority of that on your people, on making sure that they've got you know, paychecks coming in. There's also some requirements to keep your FTEs. There's another one of your new acronyms, your full-time equivalent. So keep your you know, folks at the same level, so not permanently lay off people, bring people back. So that one's the pretty straightforward one. As far as forgiveness, and as Roland mentioned, it's also possible that if you don't spend it on that, but it will turn into a loan with a fairly short payback period.
Yeah.
But the idea is to put money in the hands of your employees. So just think of that one as the place that you put money into your employees' hands. The EIDL, on the other hand,
in this video, we're going to walk through how to apply for a small business loan.
Roland. Okay, we're good.
We actually have a walkthrough of how to. I was going to post the link into our article, and when you pull it up, it actually gives you a walkthrough of literally how to apply for the EIDL. So that's the small business loans up to $2 million. And so, you know, those are different than the PPP. Those are, as Roland mentioned, the larger amounts, you know, larger payback period, and those are for businesses with fewer than 500 employees. And you can get both, but then you can't use it for the same purposes. So you can't use the EIDL and the PPP for the exact same purposes. So the EIDL can be used for payroll costs or increased material costs, like things are more expensive now, it's difficult to come by things. You can use it for rent, and you can use it for mortgage payments, and other things that, because of the current economic situation due to COVID-19, you are experiencing, you know, hardship. So payroll, materials, rent, mortgage, and other obligations that you can't meet. But again, you can't double and pay payroll, you know, EIDL and PPP. So PPP, think payroll. EIDL is the other stuff if you've got both.
Yeah, and let me add to that, for those who are trying to take advantage of that Social Security tax deferral, there's a little bit of a interesting relationship between like the PPP stuff. So basically, long story short, if you get your PPP loan and you don't know if it's forgiven, you can also go for the Social Security deferment, which basically means that your portion of Social Security tax that you end up paying for your employees, you can defer it for up to 3 years. Or at least half of it is due at the end of next year, and then the other half the year after that. But the moment you find out your PPP loan has been forgiven, then at that point you have to stop it. But you don't have to pay back that Social Security tax. It just falls into that normal cycle. So if you're still looking for more cash and you've received your PPP, or whether or not you have received it, go for that Social Security deferment, which, you know, our platform offers that, allows you to defer your taxes. I'm not sure about other platforms, but that's a great way to like have a combo effect of that relief.
That's awesome. So Mel just posted the EIDL the blog post on there that breaks down everything she just talked about. So Will, let's get into our next section. Gusto published a really great COVID-19 employee report. And so I've been reading that. What did your report conclude here about the trends you're seeing since COVID-19 started?
Yeah, so a lot of things, right? Data analysis. We have a data science team here at Gusto, and based on our data, we saw three major things. We saw that lower income employees are more than likely to be laid off than higher income earners. We saw that Gen Z and new entrants to the workforce saw huge deep cuts around layoff and furloughs. And then we saw that the jobs in low income areas are the ones that are at most risk. So as far as like low income employees, what our data saw is that hourly employees that were making less than $20 per hour basically experienced a 115% higher rate of layoffs compared to those making $30 or more. Right. And that's a huge disparity as far as like not only the amount of money that you make, but from those who are, let's say, lower income earners to higher income earners. As far as like the Gen Z force, it was really interesting. Workers under the age of 25 experienced like 93% higher rates of layoffs than workers above the age of 35. So there's this disparity. And a lot of it was really in, like I said, that restaurant and the restaurant industry and the tourism industry. Apparently there was a lot of younger employees within those sectors, and those were the sectors that were hit the most. And then lastly, the jobs in the lower income areas, employees who work in businesses located in lower income areas are 25% more likely to have been laid off compared to employees who are working in higher income areas. So when you look at our data here at Gusto and we're tracking, let's say, hourly versus salary and all this kind of stuff, it was an interesting perspective to see multidimensional impacts of coronavirus to those who are lower income, higher income, in lower income areas versus higher income areas, and then age gaps as well.
Was there any data, Will, that you guys had that was like specific to just the home services piece, or anyone that's in construction or that, as it relates to some of that data?
Yeah, we surfaced the top 10 industries based on our data. And in the top 10, manufacturing and wholesale and other personal services were probably close to something like that. But HVAC, that kind of industry, didn't surface in our data, or at least weren't as impacted in the top 10. A lot of the top 10 impacted industries were those that were kind of like very, very retail oriented, customer facing oriented, generally not B2B or business to business, even though I know there's, HVAC for personal homes and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of it was just tourism, food and beverage, right? Salon and spa. That's why I think a lot of those have made the news recently to try to reopen, because those are the ones that have been hit the hardest.
Right, and you're going to start to see all the Chapter 11s coming. J. Crew announced filing for Chapter 11. You've got big companies like Macy's and things, JCPenney. Basically, if you were in retail and you weren't selling groceries,
right,
you've probably been at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No, that's tough. So speaking about as jobs are ticking up, we've got that trades health index that we showed kind of at the earlier part of the show here. So we're seeing this start to come back. It's not V-shaped. It is kind of U-shaped, although it still looks funky with some spikes in some of the industries. So obviously there's probably different strategies that our pros should start thinking about as they start thinking, hey, I got to bring some labor back. I need help. I've got an increasing volume. What do I do now? What do you think they should do in terms of what labor they should bring in? So should they be hiring new employees and treating them as such? Should they hire them as individual contractors? If they haven't furloughed them, they've got some different options. What are some strategies there that they should be considering, given there's some variability given that we don't know if there's going to be a resurgence
Mhm.
of what's going to happen here as we start to relax some of these kind of restrictions, what's some of the standard advice that you see you guys at Gusto giving out, and maybe even some of the accountants that are kind of giving out there too, because this impacts that as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you what I know. So I've been a public accountant for all my adult career. So I actually recently joined Gusto to lead their accountant channel about a year ago. Prior to that, I owned a public accounting firm, a cloud-based accounting firm based in South Florida. And what I actually immediately did was went back to the Great Recession to see what behaviors were done there. And that was between like 2008 and 2010. And so when I went back and said what was done during the Great Recession that is kind of being done today, even though I know there wasn't a pandemic back then, a lot of the workforce got hit back in the 2008 bubble bust, right? And so a lot of accountants actually lost about half of its workforce. A lot of industries were impacted greatly back then. And the trend that was seen back then was when the recession hit and companies were trying to get back into business and were trying to scale up, they were leaning really heavily on outsourced work. So they were going the contractor route in order to try to scale up to a point to bring those contractors on to full-time employees. So it'll be interesting to see, I wish I had a crystal ball of what we'll see here in the next 18 months, 24 months, and whether or not how long this recessionary period will be. But my understanding, looking at the history, is you'll probably take a big hit workforce-wise, depending on the industry that you're in, and you'll probably fill in the gap with outsourced talent and contractors until you get to yourself to a point where you feel really comfortable with your revenues in the new normal, and where you're going to start to bring those contractors on as employees. And so I think you'll see a similar trend nowadays as we saw back then between like 2008, 2011.
And I'll also just mention that one of, unfortunately, the common errors a small business makes is misclassifying someone as an independent contractor that should be an employee. So the general rule is that an individual is an independent contractor if you as the payer has the right to control or direct only the result of the work, not what will be done and how will be done. So if you treat them like an employee but call them an independent contractor, they're probably still really your employee, and you've probably not been having proper withholdings, and that's an area where you can get into trouble. One of the first things any HR professional does when they join an organization is they take a look at all the independent contractors. It's a big area of liability for companies, and the smaller you are, the less of a target you are, certainly, but you're also probably more likely to make an error. So just because you've called them an independent contractor doesn't make them an independent contractor. So it's definitely, and there are flow charts online and things that literally the IRS.gov, they have flow charts where you can try to determine if someone is an employee or independent contractor. But for example, I would not have an opportunity to just tell Alexa and Roland that they're now independent contractors. If I still control their work, tell them what to do and how it'll be done. Alexa, you've got to be here every night at 5 o'clock. This is what I need you to do. She's my employee, whether or not I want her to be or not. So just a word of caution there.
There's a tip too for our pros that we give out really often is if your people are using your tools or your trucks, then that is automatically a huge red flag. I know a lot of our pros have a lot of passion and love for the tools, but if you're loaning them out, if other people are using them, if they're truly independent, they got to have their own trucks, their own sprayer, their own license, all their own stuff. And if they don't, you're getting really close to that line already. So
I gave you a good link in the chat from IRS.
Yeah, I was going to say that's such a great call out, Mel, because you definitely don't want to step on the independent contractor rake, which is trying to treat employees like independent contractors. People do it all the time, and they get themselves in trouble with the Department of Labor. And to Mel's point, IRS.gov actually has some really good guidance on this, on helping to decide employee versus contractor designations, whether or not you control their behavior, the finances, the relationship, stuff like that. But yeah, you definitely don't want to step on the IC rake at all. But
I haven't heard it called a rake before. I like that.
Well, people, I mean, obviously it's, as business owners, and I owned a business, I had employees, 10 employees at my old firm. And, you want to try to curb your costs, right? And especially in times like this, you want to try to control them greatly. And there are decisions that are made under financial pressure, and you don't want to step on that rake. You want to keep yourself above board. when it comes to treating your team like real either employees or contractors. So there's a great guidance on that.
Another piece of advice I have there is sometimes what I'll hear is, hey, I had this, salaried employee, or maybe not salaried, but I had this full-time employee. I don't have full-time work for them anymore. So I'm going to turn them into an independent contractor and just schedule them for 10, 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a huge red flag to have the same social security number as an employee and an independent contractor in the same tax year, especially, right? So what you can do instead is just convert their salary to an hourly, or if they were already hourly, you're great. Just schedule them for the hours you need. You don't need to convert them to an independent contractor to schedule them for less than full-time work.
Awesome. So let's continue down here. Well, I guess this is a good question for both of you. Are there any important are there any new employment laws changing in 2020?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear Mel's perspective on this from the HR perspective. What we're seeing obviously is a landslide of legislation around people, right? Caring for people, caring for your team, making sure that there are federal standards based on the CARES Act and all these other legislations that raise up certain minimum thoughts on certain things. And so it'll be interesting to see the downstream effects stateside of things like the federal unemployment requirements that we're stacking on top of the state unemployment benefits, right? And that's why everybody was going for the unemployment benefits, because they got either let go or they were staying at home or being furloughed. So you can go for that unemployment benefit. And what the CARES Act did was stack on top of that stateside unemployment the federal amount. And they raised up minimum requirements of, let's say, like minimum wage in order to calculate certain things. So it'll be interesting to see. I've not seen anything recently on the state side how states adapt or adopt new mentality or new approaches as a result of all the latest legislation. Curious to see what your perspective is on that, Mel.
Yeah, I think the one that we probably aren't talking about much anymore, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So that did apply to companies with under 500 employees. So that was the one with two parts. It was about up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at regular pay with a cap of $511 per day, right? So a really generous benefit. And this is when an employee is experiencing symptoms and seeking a diagnosis. They don't even have to be confirmed to have COVID-19, or if they are unable to work because they're quarantined. So I think that the first one I mentioned is the symptoms and seeking a diagnosis. This is going to start to come into play as things reopen, right? So as you get to reopening and, your employees have, 3 sick days or a week of PTO or whatever it is, if they're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and they need to quarantine on the advice of a healthcare provider, that will fall under the Families First. The other is an additional 10 weeks of paid expanded, what we call FMLA, family and medical leave, at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay if they have to care for a child whose school is closed, or if childcare is unavailable. So again, think about the states that are reopening. So your hairdresser is going back to work in Arizona and she's an employee of a salon and her daycare is still closed. Well, it's the potential that maybe she can't go back. And so then she could be qualified for 10 weeks of paid expanded family and medical leave to stay home and care for the child, despite the fact that now your salon can reopen. So this is the one that we just haven't talked about much because we've all been home for the most part, or people have been out in essential and just figuring it out. So I'll post a link here to a blog post or article that we had done at Housecall, but we'll hear more about that. There are exceptions for businesses with fewer than 50 employees. So we've still been waiting to see a lot of detail on that. But again, this conversation just has sort of been delayed, I think, by the fact that many people are at home. But as people get called back, I think this one's going to come up more often, Will.
Yeah, it's a good call out.
Mel coming through with all those awesome resources. So the ones that she's posting in here, guys, we've been pushing out over the last 8 weeks. So go into housecallpro.com/coronavirus and then click resources. There is a huge library of not only what we cover on these evening updates, but there's like podcast episodes on there, links to the YouTube videos. Like that is honestly the best resource library for you. And I know Gusto has one as well. So maybe Will or Brandon, if you're watching, can post the link to Gusto's resource library as well.
Yep.
And Will, you are the head of accounting of the accounting community at Gusto. And when we talked last week, you said you are seeing an increase of small business owners looking for accountants, but you've seen that people in your community may be hiring unqualified professionals. So when should our pros know when it's actually time to hire an outside consultant to help them?
Yeah, so I'm super passionate about this particular topic not because I'm an accountant by trade, but because I know how impactful working with a consultant or professional is in business life. There are real stats around this where when you work with someone who is either a financial advisor or tax preparer or somebody who can really advise your business to go through something like this, you have such a higher chance of success. That the data just kind of proves itself out. So I personally would recommend for you to connect with a consultant now or an accountant right now. I wouldn't wait. And there's reason why. One of them is, once again, doing the research back in 2008 to 2011 during the Great Recession. Accountants were literally called the recession-proof accountants. And it was because they were able to not only get themselves, but their clients weathered through a huge recession like they did. Accountants were generally on the front lines of tech, which is a little strange to hear, but generally on the front lines of tech, especially firms like mine, and they can help you pivot into amazing resources like Housecall Pros and stuff like that in Gusto. And they're the ones that are thinking through future-proofing your business processes and your business strategy. And so there was in a recent research that I read, one of the stats were 88% of small businesses survive their first 5 years when they're connected to a pro, compared to the industry average of like 41%. So you literally double your chance of just surviving 5 years. In moments like this is the moment where, quite honestly, a relationship between you, the business owner, and you and your accounting professional is so critical, because they can get you into other resources that can help mitigate some of that downtrend in revenue. That's why you're seeing a lot of restaurants pivot to things like DoorDash, right? And a lot of that is powered by professionals saying, hey, let's try to offset that in-person, foot traffic at your restaurant and get you into solutions that, can still get business going, and we'll get those things implemented. And when you're working with a professional who kind of understands the technology, can implement the tech stack and all that kind of stuff, you can have a huge impact on your business, and then not only weather and survive the current crisis, but then, thrive later on, because it'll future-proof you to endure like another issue or another threat like a pandemic.
And okay, so we'll paint a picture for me, for the pros watching right now. What are the qualities of a really good account and what they should be looking for versus ones that they should be running for the hills from, and maybe even can identify that their current accountant is like that right now? So can you give me the two qualities of both and what they should be looking for?
Yeah, I think accountants should have a personality. No, I'm just kidding. I think accountants, I think you need to be working with someone who is really down to earth, practical, is able to communicate really tough things in a very simple way, right? That just ends up showing somebody who has great communication skills, because at the end of the day, they're, let's say, seasoned business owners, because that's what they do for a living. And accounts notoriously can get lost in the weeds, and they start spitting out all sorts of technical stuff. So try to find somebody who's really down to earth, practical. In my opinion, I think you should connect with a modern accountant, somebody who's actually able to sort out all the technology for you, because if there's one thing that coronavirus has proven to all of us, is that you need to kind of pivot on a dime and be able to immediately implement resources and tools to work remotely, to sell remotely, to manage a business remotely, to manage a team remotely. And if your professional is unable to see that, able to map out a roadmap of technology or solutions or advice that can help you weather stuff like that, that's not the pro for you. That's where you need to run in the other direction. And if anything, what's happened to actually my profession is this whole coronavirus thing has been a forcing function to get accountants to adopt modern solutions and modern methods. And so it's been while coronavirus has been bad for the world, it's actually been good for the accounting profession, because a lot of the profession just kind of sits on old techniques and old methods. And this whole event has caused them to enforce them to rethink their strategies and rethink the way they should be engaging with their clients. And I would find somebody who is on the front lines with all of that, because it's going to be your non-equity business partner, is what I look at myself as. I'm there as your non-equity business partner to handle those things that I know that you may not be, capable of handling, like, financial moving and business pivoting. You're good at what you do, right? You're good at HVAC and that's what you do, but you may not be good at rolling out applications for your team to track mobile, movement, or you may not be good at integrating that solution with your accounting solution, with your payroll solution to activate all the relief, right? So you need to find pros that empower that kind of stuff.
All right. So Will, curveball, you ready?
I'm ready.
Question.
Hold on, curveball.
Sorry, curveball.
Curveball time.
Oh, sorry, Roland.
All right, Will, speaking of modern, I'm a 12-person HVAC shop. Do you recommend I use QBD or QBO, and why?
Oh, I got to.
No one from Intuit is watching. No one from Intuit is watching. I promise.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, go.
I can slap down Intuit all day long. I mean, personally, I would say, QBD is not going to future-proof your business. I understand there are certain limitations to the cloud, and I've been in public accounting the past 10 years and on the front lines of the revolution and digitization of not only the small business space, but the accounting space. So I would say QBO all day long because it's going to put you in a position like it is right now, right? If things go down, you can have team members like me access things virtually and remotely, right? It's going to empower you to be in a better spot. It's going to get access to really good tools. You don't have to worry about backing up data. You also don't have that single source data when you go QBD. That is, in the old days, like you would have a backup of QuickBooks, you would send it to your accountant, he would make changes, you would send it back, and there's multiple versions of the same data. Not conducive to continuity of business, right? And so like in modern days today, like that's why like I really admire like Housecall Pro, because you need to just have online solutions talking to each other all the time. And so I would go QBO all the day, and probably even more zero.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we leave it off with one question for all of our guests. Roland, what is our last question before we go into Q&A for Will?
So this one is the one we always like to ask our guests. We want to make sure that everything's actionable for our pros. So if they hear one thing and do one thing, what is the one thing that you recommend that all of our pros should be thinking about and implementing and doing tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I would want you to do is start making business decisions, not in a sequential order, but in tandem of each other. And I think that's been a learning curve of this whole coronavirus, is that we're thinking sequentially about what do I do next? What do I do after that? And I think it takes a real decision-making ability to say, I need to stop thinking sequentially about making huge business decisions for myself and start thinking in parallel of each other. And what I'm talking about is thinking of things like going after relief right now, and at the same time, pivoting your business to make sure that it endures long-term. And at the same time, think about solutions that will put your business in a better spot. So that way, 1 month from now or 2 months from now, or what they're projecting at the end of this year, another resurgence of coronavirus, you need to be making not sequential decisions, but parallel decisions. And I think that's such a huge call out from my end to say, business owner, you need to take this seriously, and business owner, you need to not make decisions, in order, but together, because it works all together. So why make decisions in sequence?
That's good advice. And I feel like more is better, especially when it comes to right now when you're trying out things, because, inevitably you got to try a lot of different things to find the one that actually sticks. Especially when it comes to marketing, especially when it comes to business pivoting, trying new things. Now's the time to do that, because if you're doing it sequentially, you might be stuck on one thing and all of a sudden you're dead in the water. So at least you got some options there.
All right, well, we've got a bunch of questions here. I know that Gusto does offer employment benefits. I know you're not the benefits expert, but we've got a couple of questions around that topic that have a little bit of an accounting slant as well. So I thought we'd go ahead and throw these out there. So Robert says, I'd love to be able to offer my employees health benefits to retain them, but we are so small. How can we do it? How could we afford it? Also, we had Cynthia asking, can we as employers pay for our employees' health insurance? How do we categorize that? What does that look like on a pay statement?
Yeah, so great call out from a big picture coming down into that question. You know, Gusto does offer health benefits, financial tools, and a lot more around benefits. You can do like medical, dental, vision. Administration comes free through Gusto, and we work with over 3,500 health insurance plans, and we have licensed advisors that kind of help you find the right coverage for your teams and for your budget. So we'll work with companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? Humana, Kaiser, Oscar, all those kind of companies. And so what I would recommend is Gusto actually has, we have an initiative internally called Benefits for All, right? And it sounds kind of familiar, but we actually offer small group coverage for small employers. So if it's you yourself, the entrepreneur, and you have one employee, you qualify for our small group plans. And so I would say, you know, reach out to our team, let our team figure out what we can offer you based on your budget, based on your teams, because at the end of the day, you know, Gusto considers itself a people platform. And what that basically means is, from an employer perspective, when you hire your teams, they don't look at themselves as like payroll employees or benefits employees or retirement employees. They look at themselves as employees, and there's a journey that they go through, an experience that they expect. And that includes benefits, that includes taking care of themselves and their family, that includes saving for their retirement. So Gusto understands that employee journey, that life cycle, is one that we need to educate on, and then empower professionals and employers to have the right resources that are affordable, scalable, and doesn't cause a lot of extra administrative effort. So we try to keep everything synced in real time and give you the resources to offer and extend out with little administration on your part, things like benefits.
Okay. So the takeaway there for all of you is Gusto, as well as other companies, offer small groups. So U+1, small group plans. You don't get a large group if you're a small company, but small group plans exist, and the cost definitely varies, and there are lots and lots of options out there. So don't think it's out of reach if you haven't gone and done the comparison and done the work yet, because
right.
you might be pleasantly surprised.
This is a great question from Angel Jones. Can we use the PPP loan money to start offering medical, dental, and vision benefits?
Yeah, that's a great call out. So PPP is meant, to Mel's earlier point, for paycheck, right? It's a paycheck protection. It's meant to make the employee whole. There's not been a lot of guidance on the extra stuff that you could do with PPP. And so what I would say is stick to the main purpose of the PPP loan, which is to bring your employee and make them whole, get them paid, and also to cover those extra items like utilities for your company and mortgage interest and the things that qualify for that. Secondly, I would also say be very careful with that, because your lender ultimately can forgive, is the one that makes the decision on the forgiveness. And so I would work closely with your lender to see what you can and cannot do with that money above and beyond what's already been explicitly stated. And I know there's not a lot of guidance with that. And you may go to your lender and say, hey, what can I do with this above and beyond what I can do with it? And they may come to you and say, I don't know, we don't have guidance. So I would stay away from stuff like that and just use it for the purpose in which it was intended.
Yeah, and I think also to remember that, you know, the PPP money is finite, it's limited, it will end, and then what? Those benefits costs are still there. So, you know, creating something that's not sustainable, you know, not necessarily a good employee experience to have someone have to pop off benefits pretty quickly because the organization could no longer afford it.
Yeah, and I would also say that some of the other relief that doesn't have a lot of the heavy requirements and mandates, like the private relief that you can get out there, maybe industry-specific relief, perhaps you can think through about offering benefits through those kind of reliefs, because there's not a lot of strings tied to that. You know, if you qualify for it, you get it. Great, you can do whatever you wish with it, depending on whatever the grant is or the private relief. I wouldn't use the federal mandated stuff for, you know, trying to get yourself in an accelerated position. It's really meant to make yourself whole.
Yep. And I would just say, remember, 75% of it has to go towards the paycheck side of things. That 25%, there's a little bit of fuzziness that can still be forgiven. The other thing too, just a trick for you guys, if you're talking to your lender, try to get them to put it in writing. So ask them a direct question, get that email back. And if they say yes, you always have a little bit of what we call CYA, cover your ass. So that is something to consider if you're ready to get scrappy. Top voted question. We got a bunch of thumbs on this. This is Angie Moreno. She watches often here. So she asks, can we hire an IC, independent contractor, for a short trial period, then convert to W4 EE if they are a good fit, so that workers' comp insurance isn't skewed in the next year's audit?
Well, her answer is sort of in the question. If
Yeah.
hiring them to do something that an employee would do, they are an employee. You can't call them an independent contractor.
Yep.
If they qualify as an employee, if they look like an employee, they are an employee. Now, you could subcontract to someone who's in total control of how the work gets done, in the case that they are truly independent, and then you could decide to hire one of your subcontractors. So that's slightly different. And on the accounting side, we'll, add anything there. But in general, just having a test run of an employee doesn't work.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a test run of employees. So I think you're pretty spot on, Mel.
Yep. All right, Alexa, what question's next? We got a bunch.
Let's see. I'll ask a question for myself. Alka Patel says, what tips can you give on hiring right now? For example, where do we place employment ads, or how do we interview with social distancing in place? Great question. People are spending more time online. They're spending less time listening to podcasts, but they are spending more time online. So all of your social medias, if you have them, those are a really good place. Ask people to share. You can even offer referral bonuses to people who might help you find a good employee, $50, Amazon gift card for anyone who refers me to my next great hire. That sort of thing can be fun. And as far as how do you interview, I mean, we're sort of doing it right now, right? I'm sitting in what did someone call this? My parlor. I'm sitting in my parlor at home, and I have no idea where all of you are. But Zoom is a resource that can be used, and certainly phone calls are often where you start anyway. So start with the phone. You can move to video. You can do socially distanced interviewing as well. I recommend something, out in sort of open air and space, but it is a challenging time, that's for sure. So certainly you want to follow any of the recommendations of your state and local governments as far as contact, but we do a ton of video interviewing at Housecall during normal times. Just people are busy and traffic is thick in San Diego, and so sometimes it's just more convenient for people, at least in those early stages, to have an interaction like this before we bring them in person.
And remember, guys, if they can't figure out how to get on Zoom, you just dodged a bullet.
That's what Angie said. It helps show how tech savvy they are.
Perfect.
That's awesome. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, in fact, there's some really amazing virtual solutions to have employees or prospective employees fill out surveys, submit video submissions. I'm thinking of things of like smartrecruiter.com. You could easily scale up background checks using things like Checker. And Checker is an amazing solution that really does background checks that kind of help your business move forward. And so there's a lot of resources now that you can ask for, questions that can be answered remotely, ask for video submission in the recruiting software. And a lot of that kind of gets you that, that social distance in place.
I like that a lot, because one of the things we talk about on the show is how to hire good people. And we talk about hiring people with personality, and you want to meet those people virtually. And if they put up a good video, they're going to turn it on for your customers. So I think that is a great recommendation. And one more question that's actually been across both Facebook and here. It's about how to actually, so from Facebook, this is from Tamara Mattingly, and then we have a couple of anonymous people asking on Zoom, how do I actually pay my employees with the PPP? What does tracking for that look like?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So you would pay your employees like you normally would through payroll. PPP is just like money that's been given to you, so that way you can run payroll through your normal payroll provider to pay that employee. Hopefully that payroll provider will do things like what Gusto has done, be able to track that those payroll runs and be able to serve up that data in that forgiveness report. And that's what's kind of key with that. So you don't want to go outside the lines of what you already currently have in place regarding payroll solution. You don't want to launch anything new. You don't want to get yourself into something that's let's say off the books or off the payroll run. So just think of the PPP as a loan money or forgiven money or money from your grandma or your grandpa or your mom or dad. right? That they're just going to say, hey, here you go, use it for paying your payroll. Money hits the bank, and then go through your normal solution to pay your employees.
We do have some pros who were sort of early to receive this money and just wanting to make sure that they knew exactly which money was their PPP money. We're linking, you know, a new account as like, this is where I'm going to pay my payroll out of. I'm going to deposit the PPP into this bank account, and the only thing that's coming out of here is payroll, so that they felt really secure in that. So there's been some nice creative solutions out there.
No, that's really good. I mean, it's always about like separating your money and just making sure you're using it. There is no validation as far as the forgiveness is concerned to make sure that you have separate bank accounts. So don't think you have to do that. But it's definitely best practice to if you want to separate it, make sure you're using it for the right purposes.
Great advice. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Will, for joining us. You're an awesome guest with a lot of knowledge to share. And Gusto is actually a partner of Housecall Pro. So, Will, can you share with our audience the deal that you currently have going on for both Gusto and Housecall Pro?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull it up here in front of me. But yeah, so for Housecall Pro users, we're giving away the first 3 months of Gusto for free, and then the 3 months after that, 50% off. So you'll get a special deal and discount because you're an amazing Housecall Pro user or a small business owner, and we love small business. So does Housecall Pro. So you'll be able to get 3 months free at Gusto. Get yourself onto Gusto's People platform and actually access all the COVID-19 resources that we have in product. Access those PPP reports, access those PPP forgiveness reports. All of that is immediately accessible to you inside our solution. And then if you decide to stay on past 3 months, you'll get the next 3 months 50% off.
That is a
That's super
deal
cool.
I've ever heard of one. And if you're a non-Housecall Pro user, what is the deal you currently have going on there?
Yeah, so right now we're offering 3 months off or 2 months off for those who are not Housecall Pro users. So you won't get that 50% off, but if you go through Housecall Pro, you'll get that extra benefit. You'll still get access to the Gusto's platform and those COVID-19 resources. Also forgot to mention, if you're not connected with our pro, Gusto has a partner program where we have Gusto accountants, Gusto partners that can help empower you there. So we're trying our best to make sure that if you're a small business owner that's not connected with a professional, we actually have certified professionals or a list of professionals that have joined Gusto's partner program, joined Gusto in the partner mission, and making sure that small businesses succeed and survive and thrive. And so you can get access to them as well.
That's an awesome.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, we get asked all the time for good accountants. So if you're wondering, we've got a couple certified partners. They've got a whole bunch in this list. So if you sign up, you'd be able to go figure and get one out now, because you guys heard the stats. You are going to be far better off, especially in hard times now, that if you have this, what do you call it? The non-equity business partner on your side, checking over things.
Exactly. So tomorrow is our last broadcast of the week, and we are airing our interview with Barbara Corcoran. She's a shark on Shark Tank. We pre-recorded it. We had an interview with her yesterday, and some of you were able to watch it live, and I think you guys can attest. This is one you do not want to miss. Me personally, I had 2 pages of notes, and I was the one talking to her. So please join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Will, the whole Gusto team, you're, of course, welcome to join as well, too. So that is what's going to wrap up our evening update for the week. I posted a link in there. So I always say at the end of this, let's go continue this conversation on Facebook. So Kendra actually posted what Will's final send-off to you guys was, the one actionable takeaway. So go click on that link. I just posted it right now. If you want to continue this discussion further in our Facebook group, to connect with other pros, maybe get some recommendations for accountants on there, that's what that's for. So we'll see you in the Facebook group. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Gusto. And we will see you tomorrow.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
All right. See you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Bye.